The morning fog clung to Eldenbrook like a ghost, curling around the crooked rooftops and cobblestone streets. The village had known nothing unusual for decades. Life flowed predictably, marked by the rise and fall of the sun and the gentle rhythm of the river. Then, one morning, a boy appeared. No one saw him enter. He was simply there, standing near the edge of the village square, his clothes patched and worn, his gaze distant yet strangely intense. Children stopped mid-step as they passed him, and even the village dogs whined softly, sensing something different in him. When he spoke, it was as though the air itself bent around the words. The sounds were beautiful and alien, strings of syllables that seemed to hum with life. Nobody understood, not the blacksmith, not the baker, not even the elders who had lived long enough to think they had seen every kind of person. "What language is that?" whispered a woman, clutching her shawl. No answer came, save for the boy's quiet murmur. And yet, the words carried a weight, an unspoken invitation to look closer, to wonder. Among the villagers, only one child dared approach him. Lila, a curious girl of 9 with hair like autumn leaves and eyes wide with questions. She found him by the river, sitting on a mossy stone, staring at his reflection. You speak funny," she said, hesitant but fearless. The boy blinked. For a moment his gaze was sharp, almost wary, then softened. "It's the only way I understand," he whispered, his words flowing in that strange, unrecognizable melody. "I come from somewhere that no longer exists. People like me are not supposed to be here." Lila tilted her head, puzzled. There was something both fragile and infinite about him, like a candle flickering in a dark room. Maybe you just need someone to listen," she said. That simple statement sparked a silent bond. Lila didn't need to understand the language. She could feel its meaning. Days passed, and the villagers continued to whisper. But Lila observed him quietly. One afternoon, she followed him into the forest and discovered him kneeling beside a wounded dog, its leg twisted awkwardly. He began speaking in his language, soft, lilting, almost like a lullaby. Leaves rustled gently, the sunlight danced on the water, and when he finished, the dog slowly rose, shaking its leg and looking at him with gratitude. Lila gasped. You healed him." The boy shook his head. "I did not. The words, they remind the body and soul to remember themselves. That's all. Some villagers, when told, called it witchcraft. Others whispered that he was a messenger of some ancient god. Lila, however, only saw the truth. He was trying to bring life back to things that had been forgotten." Professor Hargrove, Eldenbrook's oldest and most skeptical scholar, had spent his life studying languages, myths, and forgotten scripts. When he first heard of the boy, he marched to the river with his notebook in hand. "Speak your language for me," Hargrove demanded, adjusting his spectacles. The boy hesitated, a shadow crossing his eyes. "Some words are too powerful," he murmured. "They can change people, even their hearts. They were never meant to exist here." Hargrove frowned, intrigued rather than frightened. "And yet you speak them anyway. Why?" "I must. Otherwise, I forget." His voice cracked. For the first time, Hargrove noticed the boy's loneliness, the quiet gravity that hung around him like a cloak. He realized that these words were more than a language. They were a vessel of memory, emotion, and life itself. That night, Lila dreamed. She wandered through an impossibly luminous forest where rivers shimmered with silver and the trees whispered in the boy's tongue. Every sound carried a story: love and loss, joy and fear, bravery and despair. She could not understand the words, yet she felt them deep in her chest. When she woke, the room felt smaller, the world dimmer in comparison to the grandeur of what she had seen. "This language, it's alive," she whispered to herself. "It remembers everything." She began to see the boy differently, not as strange, not as frightening, but as a bridge to a forgotten truth about the world and humanity itself. Fear, however, is persistent. Rumors of black magic and dark arts spread through Eldenbrook like wildfire. A crowd formed, shouting that the boy must leave. Lila stood before them, trembling, her small voice carrying over the angry shouts. "He hasn't hurt anyone. His words, they carry beauty. Can't you see that?" The villagers sneered and jeered. Words alone could not sway fear rooted in generations of superstition. The boy watched silently, his jaw tight, knowing that some hearts cannot hear even the purest melody without pain. Lila's courage, however, gave him hope, a reminder that not all humans are blind to wonder. Determined to prove himself, the boy led Lila deep into the forest. He spoke to the trees, the wind, and the river, his language a rhythmic song that seemed older than time itself. Leaves shimmered with light, water sparkled, and the air seemed to hum. Birds and creatures paused, listening. "You see," he said softly, "these words, they do not harm. They remember what the world often forgets." Lila's eyes widened. She realized that his words were a kind of magic, less about power, more about connection. The world itself responded to him as if it recognized its own long-lost language. Hargrove returned, more determined than ever. "I must hear this language," he said, notebook ready. The boy recited a simple phrase. Hargrove's rigid, skeptical mind shattered. Memories long buried returned in an instant. His wife's laughter, the dog he had as a child, moments of joy and sorrow he had long buried. Tears streamed down his face. "It's miraculous," Hargrove whispered. It speaks to the heart itself." The villagers, hidden nearby, witnessed this transformation. Some began to murmur apologies to the boy, realizing that the fear they felt was misplaced. Late one evening, Lila asked him about where he came from. "I come from a place called Alarion," he said softly, "a world where words could shape reality. We fell, and I was sent here to learn, to remember, to teach." Lila felt a shiver run down her spine. You're from a lost world?" "Yes," he replied, voice low, "but I am here now. And I hope, in small ways, I can remind your world of what it once was." The gravity of his words sank into her heart. This boy, out of place in every sense, carried the weight of an entire civilization. Even as some villagers marveled, others grew restless. Fear of the unknown is a force difficult to tame. One night they gathered, demanding the boy leave. He did not resist. Instead, he whispered in his language. A gentle warmth filled the air. Anger faded, confusion replaced it, and for the first time, the villagers felt their hearts lighter, their minds clearer. They could not comprehend what had happened, but they sensed the truth. This boy's language was not dangerous, it was transformative. The boy had grown quiet over the past few weeks, observing Eldenbrook from the edges, listening to the villagers' whispers. He knew fear lingered in many hearts, yet hope was slowly awakening in others. One crisp morning, he called the villagers to the square. His voice, soft but compelling, carried a new rhythm. "I have something for you," he said. From the folds of his tattered coat, he produced a single small stone, smooth and glimmering faintly in the sunlight. "This is not just a stone," he said in his language. "It carries hope." The villagers exchanged skeptical glances. One woman muttered, "A stone? How can a stone?" But the boy whispered a word, and the stone seemed to hum in their hands. People felt warmth spread through their chests. Old arguments faded from memory. Children laughed and held hands with strangers. Eldenbrook had never felt so alive. For the first time, many villagers realized his words were not dangerous. They were gifts that could change hearts. Professor Hargrove, captivated and humbled, began dedicating himself to studying the boy's language. He realized it was not just words. It was a key to the human soul. Certain phrases inspired courage, others unlocked memories long forgotten. One evening, Hargrove tried a simple sentence on himself. Immediately, he felt tears he hadn't shed in decades. Tears for the wife he lost too soon, the friends he had neglected, the dreams he had abandoned. His hands shook, but he smiled, realizing he had been given a gift, too. "The boy, he doesn't just speak," Hargrove whispered to Lila. "He reminds us of what it means to be alive." The village's perception shifted slowly. Some still feared, but curiosity and reverence grew. Lila spent nearly every day with the boy, exploring forests, chasing river currents, and mapping ruins abandoned for centuries. "Why me?" she asked one afternoon as they sat by the riverbank. "You listen without fear," the boy replied. "Most cannot hear what they cannot name. But you hear." Lila felt her heart swell. He trusted her, and she began to understand fragments of his language. Each word was like a brushstroke painting emotions she had never felt before. Joy, sorrow, hope, and courage intertwined. In that bond, the boy found a home he never had, and Lila found a friend unlike any other. In the weeks that followed, Eldenbrook transformed. Children began mimicking the strange sounds, humming them while they played. The elderly smiled more, forgiving old grudges. Families reconciled after decades of silence. Even the once skeptical merchants and blacksmiths began offering their help freely, noticing a warmth in their own hearts they hadn't felt in years. The village had been given a second chance, not through wealth or politics, but through words that touched the deepest parts of the human soul. The boy's presence had awakened something eternal, empathy and remembrance of the simple beauty in life. One night, distant travelers arrived. Soldiers, warned of rumors about strange magic, came demanding the boy be handed over. They feared powers they could not comprehend. Panic swept through Eldenbrook. The villagers wanted to protect him, but they were no match for trained soldiers. The boy looked at Lila, then at the crowd. "I cannot stay," he said softly. "My time here is done. But what I have taught you, carry it in your hearts." Fear gripped everyone, yet in his calm voice, they felt the courage to endure, to let the boy leave safely. Before leaving, the boy gathered everyone in the village square. He whispered a series of words, each more melodic than the last. Villagers felt their meaning, not with their ears, but with their hearts. Love, courage, forgiveness, and hope filled every soul. Children laughed without reason, adults cried quietly, and the elderly smiled with relief. When he finished, he simply turned and walked into the forest, leaving behind a village forever changed. Lila ran to the edge of the forest, calling his name. He stopped and looked back, the sun glinting off his hair. "Will I ever see you again?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Perhaps," he replied. "But even if you do not, remember this. The language I spoke is not mine alone. It lives in every act of kindness, every word spoken with love. You can carry it." Tears streamed down Lila's face. She hugged him tightly, understanding that his departure was not abandonment. It was trust, placing the village and its future in her hands. Years passed, and Eldenbrook flourished. Children hummed fragments of the boy's language without knowing why it made them happy. Adults became more patient and compassionate, tackling old conflicts with newfound understanding. The boy's presence became legend, a story told by grandmothers and teachers. Some dismissed it as fantasy, but those who felt the warmth in their hearts knew better. The village had not only survived fear and suspicion, it had been transformed by hope and empathy. A child was born in Eldenbrook with a peculiar gift. She could mimic the sounds the boy had once spoken. Her parents laughed, thinking it was a harmless quirk. But soon they noticed the magic. Her words, though not perfectly formed, could heal small wounds, calm anxious hearts, and even inspire courage in moments of despair. The boy's language had taken root in a new generation, proving that even the smallest seeds could grow into something extraordinary. Far away, on a hill overlooking Eldenbrook, the boy watched from a distance. He felt pride, but also quiet longing. Words that should not have existed, words of a lost civilization, had changed a village. They had healed hearts, forged bonds, and inspired generations. For the first time in years, he felt content. Even the impossible could leave its mark on the world, and his language, once forbidden, had found its place among humans. He whispered one final word to the wind, carrying it across the village, into the hearts of all who would listen. And in that whisper, Eldenbrook learned the truth. The extraordinary often comes in forms we cannot understand, but if we listen with our hearts, it can change everything.